Welcome to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gann. We are now in season 5, and we've changed the name and the focus of the podcast. Rev Up Your Business is the podcast for small to medium-sized business owners, entrepreneurs, and HR professionals. Each week, we share tips, strategies, and trends on how you can build success in your business. I share my expertise as a people-centric leader in work culture and human resources. My guests share their expertise in human resources, marketing, sales, finance, IT, leadership, and the multiple facets that you need to take care of your business. If you love to learn and want to find out how you can rev up your business, join us. Welcome to another episode of Rev Up Your Business. Today, my guest is Laurie Hirsch Schulz. She launched LHS Coaching in 2018, following a career of over 20 years in the marketing, strategy, leadership positions with Visa, Kraft Foods, and others. As a transition and a transformation coach, Laurie partners with career explorers, solopreneurs, and nonprofit founders who are at the professional inflection points to navigate through change, to clarify, embrace, and activate new opportunities. She coaches at the intersection of work and life, supporting her clients to break through what is holding them back from change. She defines what's next and helps them map their next move. She includes one-on-one coaching, group programs, interactive workshops. She's the founder of Broad River, a women's networking group serving the Westchester, New York River towns, and is the president of the board of Westchester Youth Alliance. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, Hilda. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit more. Why did you get into this business of change and supporting people in change?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So I spent 20 plus years in corporate. You mentioned that I was at Kraft and at Visa, and almost 25. And in 2017, and I had a fabulous career. I was really satisfied. I had lots of great opportunities to do different things. I had an opportunity to do an expat position role in Europe. But in 2017, it just, for a host of reasons, it wasn't working for me. I had a terrible boss. I wasn't really happy with where the organization I was leading within Visa was going. It just wasn't a good fit for me anymore. And so for the first time, I would have to say the first time, I was really purposeful in taking a pause and thinking about what I wanted to do next. I think many people, especially in the corporate world, you just kind of coast along. I mean, you get offered a new opportunity. Do you want to do this new opportunity? Yeah, that sounds good. And for me, that's how my career went. I had opportunities to get for bigger roles and new places, but I don't want to say they fell into my lap. Of course, I worked and I deserved them, but I wasn't at a point where I really felt like I was at this big inflection point. And in 2017, I was. And I was actually really purposeful in thinking about, well, how do I want to manage this? What do I want to do next? And I actually ended up negotiating an exit package for myself. I knew that they were out there because I was having to lay people off myself. And I stayed at I stayed at Visa for another 6 months, and I left in the fall of 2017. So that experience in and of itself, in being really thoughtful and purposeful about what I wanted to do next with an inflection point, was really empowering. So in 2018, I took what I called my reboot year, and I took some time to be really thoughtful about what do I want to do next? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to take my career? And I decided to get into coaching. When I reflected back on the work that I had done through my corporate career, some of the things that I really, really loved and appreciated were being a mentor and a coach to the people that I managed. So during 2018, I got my coaching certification, and it just seemed to make, because that was such a powerful experience for me, that idea of being really purposeful about like embracing change. I think that a lot of times people feel like they're not satisfied. There's something going on that, that they feel like maybe they're not living their values anymore, which was actually the case a little bit for me at Visa. They weren't living their values anymore. They're not living up to their full potential at work. Maybe they're just bored. They have a lousy boss, but change is scary. So and I know that sounds kind of flip, but it is like what is so comfortable. So having taken that time to listen to myself when I heard inside myself, this isn't working for me anymore, that was so empowering. And so taking that experience that I had when I left the corporate world and applying it to my coaching practice, it just seemed like a natural path.
So our focus today really is helping people understand themselves and understand what's holding them back. And change is you said it's flippant, but change can be scary. And for some people, they're not comfortable with change. And in your earlier career, you sort of said, you worked for a large corporate, so there were many opportunities for you to either say, hey, that sounds interesting, and go for it, or, oh, that sounds interesting, but that's not me, kind of stuff. So you had these opportunities to almost pick and choose when you might want to make that change. So my question for you is, and I think you've already alluded to it, how, given your practice and stuff, how do people know when it's time for a change? Because you said it came, but maybe you can pinpoint, or from yourself or others, what you see as those times where you might want to reflect the change. And I want to talk about the powerfulness of that, but let's start with when and what triggers that in some.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say, I sometimes say that I do inflection point coaching. So it's these inflection points that are happening. So it can be something that's going on in your life that's an inflection point. Some examples of that could be you become an empty nester, and all of a sudden there's that opens up more opportunity. Actually, a lot of my clients, they feel like, oh, now this is my time. I can spend more. I can grow my business because I don't have to spend as much time at home. Because so that could be an example. Another example may be that people are at a certain age and everyone around them is retiring, and they feel like, well, I'm not really ready to retire yet. I feel like, again, this is my time. So it can be a personal inflection point, or you all of a sudden, I've talked to business owners who have, in their early 30s, have like gone all in their business, and then they start having children. And they want to be able to change the way that they work so that they have more free time. So that could be one inflection point, is that something's going on, a life change that gives you an opportunity, and is that inflection point to make a change. So that could be one example. Another example could be, again, I mentioned like living your values. We might talk a little bit. You and I have talked a little bit before about like your personal compass. But maybe you're finding that you're not living your values in your work. That maybe that for me, when I was feeling I was having to let people go who I thought were really incredibly smart and talented people, and community is one of my top values. And it was almost like I was having to let go of part of my, like I was breaking up my community. So that's another way. Another example of when you may be at an inflection point is that you feel like it's Groundhog Day. Every day I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing the same thing. And you're not feeling challenged, or you're feeling bored, and that's a really great example of when people just accept that and just keep going on, because it's what and it's what's safe, but you also feel like you're not reaching your full potential, or your company's not reaching its full potential. And so those are just a few of the ways And I think, I think we all have like inflection points all the time. Some are stronger than others. Some may be, I was just talking to someone yesterday whose son had a job that was making him physically ill. He was
Wow.
just so miserable. And that was a point where actually his acupuncturist said to him, maybe you should consider leaving your job. 2 weeks later, he did, and his health problems completely cleared up.
Right. I
So,
mean, that's more than an inflection point. That's almost like a physical, like,
right, that's
I
right. But you
remember
need to listen to
myself.
those things. Yeah.
I remember myself when I was working for a company and their values didn't align with mine. I mean, I always believe love what you do and love where you work. And when you don't, it's time to leave. And it wasn't time for me to leave because I was in a position that I felt I could do something to help to create a healthy work culture. But when I found that the senior people did not believe in this value system, that I was thinking, okay, to me was an inflection point. You need to, speak your truth. If you don't love what you do, then it's time to go. And I was deciding whether to go to another company and provide, that support to create a healthier work culture, or start my own business. And everything just aligned. And I went to a women's event, and the very next morning I said, I've decided I am starting my own company.
Oh, that's fabulous.
I had been reflecting on it for a while. And when I came to that decision point and this conference that I was at for self-improvement, that I was confident in the decision I was making. Yeah.
But Hilda, that's fabulous. And one of the things that I want to pick up on that you mentioned is that sometimes we don't have as many. Sometimes we feel like we don't have so many choices.
Yeah.
But even listening to realizing that change has to be made. You mentioned that you worked to try to change things from within also.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it wasn't as successful as maybe you would have hoped, but there are always opportunities. It's like listening and paying attention to that need to change, and taking action is the first step. So no matter where you are, whether it's within the company that you're at, or there are always little things that you can do. And one of my beliefs about change is that it doesn't have to be big, gigantic steps.
Right.
And in fact, those are the things that hold us back.
It's the scariness of a big change.
It's the scariness. It's the big, like, it feels like it's too big, like you're here and you want to go all the way to there. So you have a business, and I have a client who had a small business, and she knew in 5 years that she wanted to sell her business.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than like going all the way, all right, I've got to get it ready to sell, she started iterating toward actually growing her business so that when she was ready to sell, it would be worth more. Yep. But she did it in very, very small steps. She did little things, one little thing at a time. And then it's not scary. It's
evolutionary rather than
revolutionary. And so I'm a big believer in, yes, have a vision of where you want to go. So my client, her vision is to sell her business. Then you have that vision. Well, what's the first thing that you can do to, start growing it to a point where it's a certain size and that it's in a good place to be sold in this example? So the first thing she did is she brought in a part-time office manager to help her to build processes into her business in order to scale it.
Yeah.
And so, so little things, one step at a time. And she was finding that every single year her business was growing 20%, 25%. And she was working less because she was able to hire more people. And so, but if you had told her, she's been in this business, actually, I think she's in her 14th or 15th year. But if you had told her 10 years ago that, that she would have X number of people working for her and that she would be making this kind of profit margin, she would have thought, oh my gosh, I can't imagine putting the changes into my business to get there. But if you iterate, and some of it, and experiment, too, right? You experiment with things, and some things work and some things don't. But like those little steps can bring really big opportunities.
And it certainly doesn't seem so insurmountable. Share with us some other best practice tips for navigating change.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned a little bit about this idea of experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a big believer in experimentation. But in order for experimentation to work, there's this concept of having a growth mindset. So I don't know if you and I have talked a little bit about, I pulled out the book, Carol Dweck. It's a classic called Mindset. And it applies to parenting, business, school, relationships. But the idea of a growth mindset is that you see experimentation and you see change as opportunity. The opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset is essentially, I do what I do, and this is what I do. And, and that's what I know, and I don't do anymore. Or if something doesn't work out, I'm going to call it a failure. I've failed, or the organization has failed, and that, and that's it, shut it down. Whereas a growth mindset actually embraces the idea that some things will work and some things don't work. And what you learn from the things that don't work, and you build on them. And that it makes that having that growth mindset and trying new things and being willing to try new things. Like I said, even if it's a small little step, that trying new things can open up whole new doors. So I think that first of all, that's a great book. It's Carol Dweck. It's DWECK growth. It's called Mindset. But just that whole concept, of being able to learn and constantly learning, being open to learning and being open to trying, that's definitely something that I really believe in from a change perspective.
And when I hear you talk about that, the fixed mindset almost looks at things half full and then looks at it in a negative perspective. The growth mindset looks for opportunities and doesn't see those opportunities as, if you don't succeed, it's a failure. It's that opportunity, and trying it, you learn something. And
Right.
even if it wasn't as successful as you thought it would be, what did you learn from it? And then move forward and then incrementally continue to grow. And again, that's that positive half full versus the
Right.
half.
And new doors open up. Sometimes you don't know exactly what's going to open up next, but new doors will open up as you try those new things. Another tip that I really believe is really important is this idea of having your advisory council, whether it's a formal one or an informal one. Like who can you go to kind of talk through new ideas, or to even or to brainstorm new opportunities and that sort of thing. And so, if you have a business, maybe some businesses have boards if they're really big, or maybe you have some formal advisors who you can go to for mentoring and for brainstorming or networking. But advisory boards can also be informal as well. So your partner, your some friends, people who are that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about making this change, or I'm thinking about exploring this. What do you think? And that just that interaction. And the other thing that advisory boards can help you do is they can help you with accountability, because accountability is if everything is just in your head, it's very difficult to. It's different people. Some people are really super driven, but most people, it's very, very helpful to have some kind of external accountability. So when you start saying to someone, your advisory council, whether it's formal or informal, I'm looking at making this change in my business. 3 weeks later, they're going to check in with you and say, hey, how's that going? Because you've already, you've talked about it and you've put it out there.
there's two thoughts that are going on in my head. One is, yes, have that advisory board, accountability, sense of community that helps drive you. And then there's this other one where you can have an accountability partner who you exchange ideas and thoughts with. And I love that idea about, the accountability part, because I think if you keep it all in your head, it doesn't get a chance to germinate and explore new possibilities. When you put it on paper, when you talk to people about it that are in that advisory kind of role, then it becomes better. I remember one group coaching that I belonged to, the coach emailed us every Friday and said, okay, identify your top 3 wins for the week. And when you do that, it helps you know that you've made progress, because those wins don't have to be like big. They can be just little, but when you see them. And I used to put it on a Word doc and then cut and paste and then put it in Facebook, because I didn't want to create it and as I was writing it. And at the end of 3 years, like, I had so many pages of all these things that had happened and changed, and gives you a sense of pride that you've made those changes and they weren't so scary after all.
Yeah, I love that, Hilda. That's a great example. And I think celebrating that stuff is so important. Sometimes you don't, some people are self-deprecating, or they are, but keeping, I love that idea of keeping track of all those wins. And I think taking some time to actually celebrate what you've accomplished is really important too. Yeah.
You talked about this importance of advisory boards and community and support. And, I think it's just a great idea. Is that something that you would recommend for all business owners?
Yeah. I mean, why not? I mean, again, it doesn't have to be, some people do formalize them. Absolutely. I mean, especially some business owners will say, okay, I'm going to have this advisory board and we're going to meet once a quarter, and we'll meet for an hour and we'll have very specific topics. But it can also be really simple. It can be just people that you respect in your life, that you've worked with in the past. It could be some people even internally to the organization, but it doesn't have to be complicated. But it does have to be, I do recommend it being purposeful. I think that if it's just like, oh, I'm going to call so-and-so, it's not, that lack of structure, a little bit of structure may make it less successful. But if you're really purposeful and you identify even in your own head, and these are my people who are my advisors, and then you pick up the phone when you want to, when you want some advice, I think that it just gives a little bit of more oomph to it.
And I think it depends on the nature of the change that you're looking for. I know when my husband and I had our own engineering company, we had a lawyer who supported us. We had a financial advisor who supported the wealth that we were, accumulating, and how were we going to plan for that growth for as we get older and ready to retire. And then we had our accountant who was, always, part of our making sure our books were in order. And anytime we had big changes, so for example, when we created minority shareholders, we called these 3 people together and talk about our ideas and get their perspectives from that legal perspective, from that financial, growth for us in terms of our retirement, and for our accounting and our company, and how would any of these decisions, and they were with us right from the very first year of our company, right post sale. I still have my same accountant from those early days, and my financial planner, but my lawyer now is retired and enjoying his life. So I agree with you, the value of having advisors at different levels. I have 2 accountability partners that I meet with every 2 weeks, and they put me through my, okay, so how did that go? What are you doing? And what do you think about this? You said that one of the things that you also help people do is to, and I'm just referring to the notes here, what's holding them back from change. Want to talk about that a little bit more in your practice? This is what you do. So I think this is a question I'm asking my listeners. What is holding you back from change? And now Laurie's going to tell us a little bit more.
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about, just initially, it can be fear, what is comfortable. So fear is like a real thing. So, I mean, so fear definitely holds people back. Certainly that inner critic, or what you call the gremlin, right? I call it the gremlin, that inner critic who's whispering in your ear saying, you're not good, whatever it says, you're not good enough, or who's going to want to listen to you, or, this is, who said, why could you be that big? So, so that's those are like beliefs or assumptions that you can actually start to think about reframing. So those things that are, there's other ways to think about them. So an example could be, I'm too old to start something new, or nobody's, so age is always one that people always think, oh, I'm too old. And is there really truth to that? Or how do you reframe that? You reframe that. I have so much, you have all this experience, and that makes you more capable, more able to do things faster. You have more connections. Even so those are, there's things, those are the things that might be holding you back. There's also, the other things, there's like the tangible, and then there's also the intangible, or there's like anchor challenges. So an anchor challenge that might be holding someone back is something that's real. So, for example, lack of investment dollars, or lack of, you don't actually have the knowledge or the education or the background to do exactly what you're doing. But even anchor problems are ones that, when you can recognize what that is, well, then what are some solutions? This is where your advisory council what are some solutions to address those? And to, maybe it's that you hire someone who has a skill set that complements your skill sets, but being really, really clear on what I also like to say, that there's truth, like big T truths and little t truths. Big T truths are things like gravity. There is this gravity. But little t truths are things that, again, that you might believe that may or may not be true. And so even taking the time to do research, to really, to be able to get the facts. And so when you start, I think that the first step in taking change and thinking about what may be holding you back is to identify what's holding you back. So if you have this, this goal or this vision, and you're not taking any steps forward to actually move toward it, which require these steps forward toward change, start listing. I'm a big proponent of journaling, right? I mean, and you don't have to call it journaling, but just take 15 minutes and just write out all of those things that might be holding you back, and start thinking about, well, which one of these are true? Is there another way to look at this? Is there a place? Do I need to do more research? How do I start addressing some of these things that are holding me back? I mean, that's actually the beauty of coaching, right? Is that you've got all this jumble in your head, like all these different things, and, all these reasons why you can't do something, or why it's not going to work, or and with a coach, the beauty of coaching is that it helps you to clarify all those things. It's just like let's talk it out. Like, you talk about it, identify it, and start thinking about how do you reframe it.
I find it interesting because, when you hire a coach, find one that fits you. And I have all these ideas in my head, and I write them down, because when you put pen to paper, it also goes I think, into your brain, synthesizes it. So I'm a visual person, so I understand why I write, but the actual physical doing sends it back up to the brain a little bit faster. So when I have coaches that I like to work with, I tell them all the things that are in my head, and I say, so what am I saying?
Well,
Because
yeah, I mean that's yes. So
I'm
this is
not
what I'm
sure what I'm
hearing.
saying, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
and it
so,
really helps you to think about things differently. I had a client very recently who was interviewing for a new job, and it was a big job. And he said to me at the beginning, he said, "Well, I don't really have this specific skill set." And so we started over the course of the of the conversation. I said, "Well, tell me a little bit more about this. Tell me about the job. Tell me about why you don't think you have this skill set." Half an hour later, I said to him, "Now explain to me again why you don't have that skill set." And he's like, "I don't know why I said that." He's like, "Of course I have that skill set. It's just, he's like, "Of course I do." It was just reframing it.
yeah,
He
yeah,
had done that. He had done the job in a different way with a different title, but he had all the skills. And it only took a half an hour of a conversation to just reframe that thing that was holding him back and keeping
yeah.
him from feeling confident about his ability to go forward, go for the job. When in fact he did have those skill sets. It was just this like you can almost like physically feel that like it just
He
falls
had
into place.
he had
Yeah.
to articulate it out loud so he could say, "Yeah, I'm not an imposter. I do have that," and
Yes,
then build that
exactly.
confidence, right? Um,
Exactly.
I want to
Exactly.
move on now to the third thing that you like to do when you're helping people with change and supporting them in a coaching role, and that's your mapping your next move. Do you want to share a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so I use something what I call my map your next move. It's a process. The process that I use in my coaching. And it's a 5-step process that I use to navigate through change. And once my hope is that once my clients like kind of walk through this process, you can actually apply it to any change. And so the 5 steps are just really briefly. The first one is to develop your personal compass. And we really haven't talked about that too much, but what I view as your personal compass is what are your most non-negotiable values? What are those? What is your purpose or your mission in life? Um, and also what are your particular skill sets? What are your competencies? And what it differentiates you from other people who do what you do. So when you develop that, once you have that personal compass, it also includes things like what energizes you, what drains your energy.
Mhm.
Once you have this personal compass, you can use that as almost as a guide to guide through change, because what you want as you're guiding through change is you want to make sure that whatever changes you're making, whether it's personal change or to your business or a professional change, you want to make sure it's aligned with your values. So, and because dissatisfaction happens when there's a gap between your values and what's important to you in your life, your compass, when there's a gap between what you're doing and what your inner compass is telling you. So that's the first step. The second step is once you're really clear on that compass, is really clarifying what are you trying to solve for. So I'll go back to that woman who wanted to sell her business in 5 years. That's what she was trying to solve for. When she said, "I'm going to grow my business," it wasn't like, "Oh, I just want to grow my business." She knew that she had a personal goal of wanting to have to retire and have the freedom to be able to travel and go to different places, and everything that is important to her from a retirement perspective. That's what she was solving for. She wasn't trying to solve for, "I just want to grow my business." So she had this really clear end vision in place. And so when you know what you're trying to solve for, and when you get that really, really clear, that can help you to be really clear on what your direction forward is. And it's more meaningful. Like that was her why. People talk about what's your why. Her why is that she wanted to have the freedom of retirement without the, always worrying about her business. It wasn't that she wanted to become rich. I mean, of course, that's not a bad thing, but her why was she was looking for freedom.
Right.
The third, after you really define what you were trying to solve for, the third step is to brainstorm, to different options. What are some different paths? Because there's different ways to get there, right?
Right.
There's two or three or four. The fourth step is to experiment. I call experimentation, which is, we talked about, if you have those two or three different paths, start experimenting with them and seeing which one works and which one's most successful. And the fifth step is in this map your next move process is to choose a path, knowing that you can always choose again. So that's the framework that I use. And you can use that framework for any kind of change you want to navigate through.
You've supported a lot of people through this change. What are some of those things that really, what trends do you see, and what suggestions would you have for us to get comfortable with change?
Well, it's interesting around trends. I think that, and I mean, we've read about it too, but I mean, I see it in my practice that since COVID, people don't just want to settle anymore.
Right.
Like they realize that life is short. And why should we? Yeah, it's right. It's just precious that things could change at any moment. We don't know. And so I am seeing in my clients that they want to be more purposeful about what's going to bring them satisfaction. And I am seeing that desire to that intersection of life and work. So that work isn't just about like monetary, the work that they do. And I define work very broadly, by the way. It could be work in a business, it could be work in a nonprofit, it could be, a professional career, it could be, but that their work isn't just it's not siloed and separate from their personal life. And I'm definitely seeing more and more of an appreciation and a focus on, I want to get this right. And I don't want to wait. I think that people are like, because I think people have, and of course there are people who are coming to me, but I think that that's just, I mean, you're just seeing it, that, they're not willing to go back to the office full time, or they're looking for more flexibility in their work life, or whatever that may be.
Totally agree with you, and I share that with my business owners and with my colleagues in HR. During COVID, people had time, and they also had experience to manage change. And now they realize it's not so scary after all. And there's more to life than just work and finding their passions. Now they're more comfortable to find something that is work that combines their passions, their beliefs, and what they want to do. So I see a big evolution, and I think a lot of the problems we have now with trying to find good staff is part of that opportunity we experienced during COVID to understand who we are and to feel a little bit more comfortable to stretch and grow and affect change.
No, I agree. And what I think is interesting is that I don't think that change is any less scary than it was before, but I think that people are less willing. Maybe willing is not even the word. They don't want to settle anymore. They don't want to say, okay, this is okay. I think that's so that they're willing to take a little bit more of a risk, and because they see that the payback is worth it.
Thank you. And I think that's a good note to end on, how we've talked about how we now are a little bit more comfortable with embracing change. And I encourage people to get out there and be more comfortable with change. Did you want to share any final message about that whole concept of change?
I think that when you open yourself up to things that are a little scary, and to maybe taking a little bit of a risk, it's when the magic happens. I really do. I mean, magic really happens when you put yourself out there a little bit more, and that you do something that makes you feel uncomfortable. If you feel, I mean, this idea of, do something that, I think you mentioned it earlier, do something that's uncomfortable every day. When you feel a little uncomfortable, that's when you're on the right track. It's okay to feel a little uncomfortable. And actually, the more that you do it, the more you build up that muscle and you become more comfortable with the discomfort.
And then you can
And
take
that's
on
where the
bigger
magic happens.
discomforts without feeling so bad.
Right. And that's where the magic happens. That's where the sparks start flying.
I
Yeah.
love how you're talking about change as magical and sparks flying. And I hope that encourages people to just be a little bit more comfortable and see what happens. How do people get a hold of you, Laurie?
Yeah, easiest way, I mean, I have a website, lhscoaching.com, or email me, Laurie, Laurie at lhscoaching.com. That's the easiest way. And I always offer free discovery sessions to talk about what you're doing and what you're up to. And my coaching is really focused on that mindset, that when you know you're ready for a change and you're at an inflection point, no matter what you're doing, whether it's in your business or your career, and that you just want a partner to help collaborate to navigate through that change. That's the work that I love doing, and I think is really, really fulfilling.
Well, thank you, Laurie, for sharing your wisdom, sharing your element of how we need to start to be comfortable with change, and that the magic and the sparks will fly. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Hilda. This has been fun.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it. So, and to my listeners and viewers, thank you for taking the time and listening to Laurie and her focus today, which was about change and how she can help you and how you can help yourself be more comfortable with change. Thank you for tuning in to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gann. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes. For more HR tips, strategies, and to learn how you can create a people-centric workplace, visit our website at peoplebrightconsulting.com.